we good to go? Seems good. Good morning. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being here. I'm New York City Controller Brad Lander. The last several weeks, as everyone knows, have been deeply disturbing for New York's immigrant communities. So we're here today to talk about what the City of New York can, should, must do to provide more resources, especially legal resources, to immigrant New Yorkers facing deportation and legal challenges. And I'm honored to be joined by the public advocate of the City of New York, Jumaane Williams, by Councilmember Shahana Hanif, and by many of the legal services and community-based organizations who support immigrant communities. But before we get to the fear and what we can do about it, I want to just ground us in facts rather than fear. When we say New York City is the greatest immigrant city the world has ever known and that it continues to be that way, here's what we mean. Out of the 8 million New Yorkers, 40% of us, 40% of New Yorkers are immigrants, are foreign born. 50%, half of New Yorkers, live in mixed status households, including 1 million children. We are talking about the future of New York City. And every day what Trump does expands jeopardy to cover so many of them. This is not just people who might be facing expedited removal or people who might be facing deportation. We are talking about people who fear reasonably that they could have their green cards removed, that they could be deported. And now, of course, even immigrant citizens worried that if they were to travel home to their country, that they would not be allowed back by the travel ban. And now over the weekend, what started as peaceful protests in Los Angeles against those very policies have devolved as Donald Trump has deployed the National Guard with the purposeful goal of striking fear into immigrant communities and provoking conflict for the very purpose of trying to extend authoritarian tactics further and further into American communities. It is a strategy of striking fear and intimidation into the American people, and we are going to stand up against it. And look, in New York City, we are getting hit hard here as well. ICE detained an 11th grader from Queens, now the second New York City public school student targeted for arrest, for deportation and removal, and not even extended legal representation to defend themselves against ICE. Despite New York being a welcoming harbor for generations of New Yorkers, ICE is abducting many immigrants as their cases are dismissed in court, leaving immigrants frozen in fear. And this is happening at Federal Plaza, at Varick Street, at Elk Street, at 290 Broadway. Our members of Congress denied their right to be in court. Religious leaders and court watchers arrested by ICE and in some cases by the NYPD. And so I myself went last week to sit in and observe master calendar hearings at 290 Broadway, along with the organization Immigrant Arc, joining their Friend of the Court program, which tries to ensure that folks will have legal at least some minimal legal advice. In this case, at the very last minute. The families that I saw had no idea what they were coming into. They were not represented by lawyers. No one had provided them meaningful legal advice in advance of their hearing. So thankfully, the Friends of the Court program from Immigration Arc was at least there to give them a little bit of advice. So when they learned that DHS was going to be dismissing their deportation case, that might sound good to you, as it did to Dylan Contreras. At least these folks were able to understand, actually, that's bad for you. It'll invalidate your asylum application and make you subject to expedited removal. So in these three cases, thanks to the advice from Friend of the Court program, they rejected that. They said, I don't want my asylum application invalidated. And even though the judge found against them and makes them subject to expedited removal, they've got a 30-day window to object. And we were able to walk out of that building in the case of those two parents, Manuel and Maria, that they could reunite with their families and plan for their futures. These are pro se respondents who help folks without legal counsel in some of those administrative hurdles. And those programs, when people do get legal representation or when they have that friend of the court program, they are often successful in deterring ICE from executing its increasingly authoritarian deportation agenda. We see this time and time again because immigration legal services and pro se assistance help stabilize people's immigration status, give them access to work authorization, help them keep their families together, help them ensure that they have some modicum of due process, help them avoid family separation and deportation. Unfortunately, without access to legal representation, many more non-citizen New Yorkers are facing, and if we don't change it, will continue to face the reality of detention and deportation, of family separation, of communities being destabilized, and undermining our city as a whole. And I'll just say, probably the saddest moment that I saw last week was we essentially witnessed a family separation. A couple came in, a married couple, they had applied for asylum together. DHS brought a motion to sever their cases. And so the wife has a hearing a year and a half from now on her asylum application. The husband, with the very same situation and asylum application, his deportation proceeding was dropped, his asylum application invalidated, and he is now subject to expedited removal. And they had no idea that a family separation was about to be executed right there, and they lacked any legal representation, and really only thanks to Immigration ARC were they even vaguely aware of what they might do and what might happen. And so, even as we are focused on the questions of what's happening in the streets, and there'll be protests later today, and we can talk about that as well. What we're here to do this morning is talk about what New York City can do and demand that in the city budget, now being negotiated between the city council and the mayor, that New York step up and provide the representation and legal services that these New Yorkers deserve. Yeah, you can clap for that. And I just want to underline this for a minute. It's, what's happening in the streets is on people's minds and in people's vision. But what's happening in the courts and what's happening in our schools and our public hospitals, what's happening in our libraries, getting communities and families the resources that they need at this moment, that is something that New York City can do, must do, and is not doing at anywhere near the scale that we need to. Again, I want to remind you what we're talking about here are well over 1 million New Yorkers who are either undocumented or have a status like DACA or TPS that Trump has threatened. The scale of New Yorkers who need and deserve the kind of services we're talking about is very large. And yet currently, New York City is only spending about $60 million on the totality of legal service programs. And what we are demanding is to increase, to make an increased investment in this year's budget of another $170 million, bringing the total to $230 million a year to provide some basic access to legal services to protect immigrant New Yorkers from the threat of deportation and creeping authoritarianism and arrest. So I'll break it down briefly, and then you're going to hear from some of the people who work day to day in those programs and can really tell you the difference they make. So what we're calling for today is $60 million for immigration legal services through the restoration of Action NYC in schools, libraries, and hospitals. The Adams administration has reshaped the Action NYC program only in a couple of specifically city or Moya offices. But if you're an immigrant New Yorker right now, you might well be afraid to go to one of those offices and way more likely to trust someone in your school or in your neighborhood library, or if you're at a public hospital, to get get some advice. Another of the families I met last week, Maria and Manuel, if their school social worker or parent coordinator had connected them to Action NYC resources, then they might well have known what was happening before they ever showed up. So number one, grow Action NYC to $60 million and restore it in New York City's schools, libraries, and hospitals. Second, $40 million for the Immigrant Opportunity Initiative to provide legal services to low-income immigrants for citizenship, for permanent residence, for work authorization. That's a program that we helped launch when we were in the council that has been expanded under Councilmember Hanif. Third, $34 million for the New York Immigrant Family Unity Project. That's the nation's first and now still largest public defender program in the country for detained immigrants in removal proceedings. Fourth, to restore what's called the iCare program. Dylan Contreras, he's an unaccompanied minor and he had no legal representation. We need to restore the iCare program to provide legal representation for unaccompanied children. And also expand the Rapid Response Legal Collaborative for people who are directly facing the threat of expedited removal and deportation. We also recommend to repurpose the resources that were going to the Asylum Application Help Center, which the city closed, and get that out into the neighborhoods and to the legal service and community-based organizations that are most likely to be trusted to provide these services. We are pushing to restore the city, to strengthen New York City's sanctuary city laws, including passing the New York City Trust Act, sponsored by Councilmember Shahana Hanif, and you'll hear from her about that. It would create a private right of action to strengthen and protect immigrant New Yorkers and make sure those sanctuary city laws are actually upheld. We're calling on the state in the waning days of the session to pass the Access to Representation Act by Senator Brad Hoylman-Siegel and Assemblymember Catalina Cruz. That would guarantee legal representation to New Yorkers facing deportation who can't afford an attorney on their own. The other thing we're trying to do here is connect the dots better between the city's sanctuary city laws, which say the city won't participate with ICE in denying people due process and moving toward deportation, but connecting the dots between that and this network of legal service and community-based resources. Because if the receptionists and the social workers and the parent coordinators in our schools, if the patient advocates in our public hospitals, if the staff in our city shelters not only know we don't let ICE in, but we actually help the immigrants in our public hospitals or our shelters or our schools connect to the resources that we can provide, they have so much better a chance at defending their due process rights, at preventing their deportations, at keeping their families together. And that is the tradition that this city should be proud of. That's what that statue in the harbor calls on us to do. If you're gonna say, bring me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, then you must provide the legal resources necessary to keep them free. Thank you very much for being here. And now I'm gonna introduce you to some of the people to tell you a little more. And the first up is somebody whose fearless voice you have heard many times, my longtime partner in safety, public advocate, Jumaane Williams.
Thank you, thank you. I'm gonna ask you to stand here for a second. I just want to be able to say I've known Brad 15, 20 years. There's been a lot of political wins. Sometimes they're at our backs. Most of the time, they were facing us and we were going head on. Brad has been someone of a principled stance, whether the wind is blowing with him, whether the wind is blowing against him. I just want to say thank you for that, because it is hard to find people who will stay principled no matter what is happening in our city and in our country. And I've been proud to stand with you, and I look forward to continue standing with you again. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Not surprised that Brad is here and leading this charge. I will speak for myself only. I'm also surprised that the mayor is not here. I'm not surprised, I'm sorry, that the mayor is not here. And that is very, very frustrating. As Brad pointed out, we are a city of immigrants. That 40% number, I know, balloons even more if you talk to people whose parents are immigrants or whose grandparents are immigrants, just a generation or two removed from being immigrants themselves. That number soars in this city. And I will tell you, every time there's been a wave of immigrants, we've had xenophobia pushed back. We are now in a state where an authoritarian wannabe is in charge of pushing the xenophobic narrative. There are 54 countries in Africa alone. Only one of those countries deserve assistance in expediting people to this country. And of that country, only white South Africans are the ones that deserve to be pushed to expedited. That is not me making anything up. That is what it is from the Trump administration. If you were a MAGA conservative person who stormed the White House, who stormed the Capitol, not only were you just a peaceful protester, you are deserving of a pardon. If you are a black and brown immigrant, or your families are black and brown immigrants, you are now, for some reason, a national threat that needs to be removed from this country. That's where we are. That is what it is. We are not making things up. These are quite literally white supremacist philosophies, and I need to call that out. And to not have a mayor, a black mayor who represents a city of immigrants, not lead the charge is severely disgraceful and disappointing. And to see high-ranking members of the NYPD golfing with Donald Trump while people are being taken from the courthouse, while they're calling the National Guard and Marines on peaceful protesters as they are trying to protect their fellow Americans, as we are not going after criminals and gangsters and people who are illegally, we're going after people who are here very legally and actual citizens. The mayor has a right to make sure that New Yorkers know what we have planned for protests that are inevitable. But I haven't heard anything from his mouth about what this administration is doing. And there are two things as leaders of this city that we can do. We can raise our voices the same way Eric Adams raised his voice against Joe Biden on immigration. He can raise his voice right now to tell them that we are going to do everything we can to protect all New Yorkers, including immigrant New Yorkers. And the next thing that we can do is, like what Brad is saying, make sure that resources are going to people who are best positioned to protect New Yorkers. And that is making sure that in this budget, we have money for those who provide legal services. Imagine being tricked to come to the courthouse, thinking that the dismissal of your case is something good, and you were taken. You cannot speak to your friends, you can speak to no one. This is what's happening. People are being kidnapped, ripped off the street by folks in masks. Our conservatives were very concerned about people in masks. I haven't heard them say anything right now. I have zero faith right now. Minus 300% faith in this mayor. But I am thankful there are other citywide elected officials that I do have faith in. One of them is Brad Lander, our comptroller. Another is our speaker, Adrian Adams, and the city council. And city council members like Shahana Anif, who are going to do everything they can to make sure this budget reflects the crisis that we're in. And while the mayor is capitulating to an authoritarian, I'm thankful that we have leaders in this city that will push back and say we have to do everything we can to get funding in this budget right now to provide the legal services that our human beings need. We have to remember to bring the humanity back. They're doing everything to dehumanize these communities, because in history, after you dehumanize people, you are then able to harm them. These are not aliens. These are not criminals. These are mothers and fathers and students. There are neighbors that is happening to. So I'm thankful to be here. I'm thankful for Brad Land and the comptroller's office for pushing this. And I'm thankful for a city council that knows what we have to do. And I hope we can push back on this mayor to make sure that these resources are not just here, but they're in abundance so that we can provide the protection that's needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Public Advocate, for your clarion call, for your leadership, for your friendship and your support. In 2016, when Donald Trump was elected the first time, I represented an immigrant community in Kensington of Bangladeshi families who were worried about what this would mean for them. And I thought it would be important to hire someone in my office who could provide support and education and resources and leadership in that community. And I had actually tried many times prior to that to hire Shahana Hanif to come work in my office. And at that moment, she said yes. And she came in right away and got to work and brought in some resources like the CUNY Citizenship Now Clinic. We provided more resources to organizations like Malika to do self-empowerment workshops. And we mobilized our whole neighborhood, not just Kensington, but the entire district by the thousands to show up and stand with our immigrant neighbors. And all of that work was led by then community organizer and city council staffer Shahana Hanif. So it has been no surprise to watch her emerge as one of the leaders in the city council fighting for immigrant families all across this term and the last one, clear-eyed in what's necessary and smart in how to organize it. And so as people have said, okay, we've got these sanctuary city laws, but it looks like they're not being followed. What do we do about it? It was no surprise that as we were putting this report together, one of the central pieces of it, in addition to increasing resources, is to provide stronger protections for those laws. That legislation is sponsored, is authored by Councilmember Shahana Hanif, and it is, like it was in 2016, an honor to have you here today.
Hi everyone, I'm Councilmember Shahana Hanif, and I just want to give a big thanks to my predecessor, Brad Lander, and of course, Jumaane Williams, for being a part of a small cohort of citywide electeds who get it, who are pushing back against Trump's divisive agenda, who are not going to allow for illegal detention and deportation, and will continue to call for a city that welcomes immigrants, that is inclusive of all people. I'm a proud daughter of Bangladeshi immigrants, and in my community right now, people are anxious. There's fear in our communities as to what does this mean for us? What does Trump's attacks mean for us when we also have a mayor who has said absolutely nothing to show us that he's going to protect us? This is a crisis. We have a leadership crisis. Thinking about Dylan and the other high school student who were detained but arbitrarily, really, shows that we are not at a good place in our city. And we need leaders who speak up for immigrant protections, separating young people from their schools, allowing ICE in schools. All of what we're witnessing is the collusion between Mayor Adams and President Trump. This is happening because Mayor Adams is allowing it to happen. So I want to highlight just 2 points in the comptroller's report, which are outlined very clearly. This budget must significantly scale up our immigration legal services. New Yorkers like Dylan and another high school student are detained, and they can't afford legal help. Our city can stand up. We have stood up and ensured that immigrant communities have access to free legal services, free quality legal services. And this is a moment for us to step up again, and the council is determined to expand funding for legal services. These cases also, of course, underscore the urgent need to fortify our city's sanctuary laws. No city agency should be an arm of this unjust deportation agenda. which brings me to my second point. I have a piece of legislation, the New York City Trust Act, to bring real accountability for city agencies that collude with ICE and violate our sanctuary policies. Right now, what we're witnessing, and we're going to continue to witness, is this collusion. Is this overriding of our sanctuary protections. My bill would strengthen sanctuary protections to fight back against ICE. Thanks to the incredible organizations here and our electeds, the bill now has 30 sponsors. That's a majority of the city council. So you can see that this is an important issue to the council, to have our Deputy Speaker Diana Ayala, Majority Leader Amanda Farias, to have key leaders in the council support this legislation shows that we are in troubling times, and we cannot allow our city to break sanctuary policies. So we meet in a moment that demands absolute urgency, and I know that I'm going to fight. I know that our public advocate, our comptroller, they're going to fight, but we need everybody to fight. Everybody knows someone who is at risk of this kind of arbitrary pickup, whose family might be separated on any given day without due diligence, without any proper notification. So this isn't just on our elected leaders. I call on and implore New Yorkers to know what your rights are, what the rights are when it comes to ICE. You don't have to open the door without a warrant, and to be very firm in protecting those who might be at risk of deportation. We're not going to wait for another cruelty. I don't want to hear about another high school student getting picked up. We need to stop this now, and to do so, the legal services expansion is a must, as is passing the New York City Trust Act. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Councilmember. This is the report that she was referring to, Protecting Our Neighbors, which is out today and digs in both on what's happening right now and on the programs that are being described here. And now you're going to hear from some of the people who actually run those programs and advocate for them every day. First up is Jillian Rowland Kane from Immigration ARC, whose program in the courts I was honored to participate with last week. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, and thank you to the Comptroller for bringing us together to address these critical issues. My name is Jillian Rowland Kane, and I'm here on behalf of Immigrant ARC, a network of more than 80 legal service providers across New York State. I just want to personally thank Comptroller Brad Lander again for coming and volunteering with us last Thursday to witness firsthand what is going on in the courts, in the immigration courts. As of December 2024, there are more than 180,000 immigrants in New York that are unrepresented and fighting for their rights in immigration court without access to legal representation. As we're seeing today, this lack of access to legal help has dramatic consequences. The data demonstrates the critical importance of representation. Detained immigrants with legal representation are up to 10.5 times more likely to win their case compared to those left without the lifeline that representation offers. For non-detained individuals, 60% of people with legal representation succeed in their cases compared to a mere 17%. It is clear when New Yorkers do not have access to representation during their immigration proceedings, they are putting their lives, families, and economic stability at risk. In the last few weeks, ICE has turbocharged enforcement in New York. We are witnessing unprecedented attacks on our immigrant communities, attacks that weaken our city. We've seen indiscriminate enforcement, arbitrary quotas, and chilling detentions taking place within our court buildings and at check-ins. The immigration arrests happening in courtrooms here in New York and across the country isn't just a policy shift, it's an erosion of due process, which is why our neighbors, community members, and loved ones deserved our increased support. Immigrant ARC operates a Friend of the Court program that we established in 2023, Through this program, we've assisted almost 3,000 individuals with their immigration cases. Friend of the Court allows us to assist pro se individuals appearing for their initial hearings, and we're able to orient folks to the court process, assist with any forms they may need assistance with, and stand with them in front of the immigration judges. As we've seen play out, programs like ours are more important than ever right now. In the last 3 weeks, our Friend of the Court team has been there to witness government attorneys moving to dismiss multiple cases, not to close them, but to pave the way for expedited removal, allowing ICE to deport individuals without a hearing before a judge. We've witnessed more than 30 plainclothes ICE officers stationed throughout the court buildings, and of the individuals we've assisted who were ultimately detained, several have already been sent to out-of-state detention facilities, some as far as Louisiana, before anyone had the chance to intervene. This happened even when judges had not dismissed the cases, and even when individuals had applied for asylum or other forms of relief. Colleagues across the country have confirmed similar actions in nearly 20 other courts. Illegal entry into the United States is typically a misdemeanor. In the United States, the right to seek asylum is a legal protection enshrined in both U.S. and international agreements. We are simply asking that these individuals, families, community members, loved ones, and fellow New Yorkers get their day in court that they are owed. Despite all the exhaustion and heartbreak of the last 3 weeks, one of the most incredible things to watch has been how New Yorkers from all parts of the city, backgrounds, experiences, have come together in solidarity with our immigrant communities. We're especially grateful to those who have and continue to volunteer their time with our Friend of the Court and court observation programs. This has turned into a critical part of our effort to witness and document the recent escalation in immigration enforcement. We join the call of Comptroller Brad Lander, to increase funding so that our member organizations can serve more people. And we once again want to thank the Comptroller for appearing with us in solidarity. Thank you, Comptroller.
Jillian, I really want to thank you. I only got to meet 3 of the 3,000, families, but they were terrified. I think if you had not advised them to object to what was happening and invoke their 30-day appeals, they might well have been removed that very day. And on the one hand, they were like shaking with fear, and on the other hand, what you did, giving them just that small amount of understanding of what was going on and a little advice and protection, I just saw what a difference it made, and I'm super grateful to you.
Thank you so much.
Everybody who works with you guys. There's a lot of folks doing that, so I just want to say we also have, as part of this coalition, folks from iCare, Jessica Cardona, folks from Bronx Defenders, folks from the Legal Aid Society, from NYCLU, from Make the Road, from IDP. It's a big network of Action NYC providers, of legal service providers, of community-based organizations all across New York City. And I just personally want to extend that gratitude to all of you guys for the work that you are doing and the difference it is making right now for terrified New Yorkers. To close us out, we're going to hear from 2 advocates, folks who fight for these resources and support people on the ground. Vladimir Tiali from the New York Immigration Coalition and Karina Kaufman Gutierrez from the Street Vendor Project.
Hola everyone. Hi, my name is Vladimir Tiali. Thank you so much, Comptroller, for having us here. And I have the honor to represent the New York Immigration Coalition. We are here today to deliver a clear message. Immigrant communities in New York deserve investments in legal services. Immigrants are the backbone of this city. We boost its economy, care for its children and elders, and bring life to neighborhoods. This is why, at a time when the attacks of the federal government intensified against our communities, New York City must take bold and decisive action to protect our communities, to protect and uphold our shared values. Because being a sanctuary city cannot just be a slogan. It must be a daily practice and a strong commitment. And right now, this commitment is brought to test. That is why we need a leadership that stands proud with our communities and a city budget that fights back with smart, targeted investments like they outlined today. And that means fully funding the life-affirming legal services in which our immigrant neighbors rely. And that is why we call for a budget that ensures that every New Yorker can fully participate in the vibrant life of our city, no matter where they're born, or if they have been here for 30 days or for 30 years. We believe in a city where everyone has a fair chance. For this reason, we are calling for the following requests. $60 million in funding for CBOs to provide immigration legal services and ensure the continuity of services against the ongoing aggressive anti-immigration policies. Increase and baseline $40 million in the Immigrant Opportunity Initiative. $34 million for the New York Family Unity Program for detained individuals. $25 million for a citywide rapid response fund for immigrant legal services. Allocate $10 million to create and expand restorative justice programs in immigrant communities, and a total of $11 million for community-based organizations providing legal services for unaccompanied minors. At the city level, we're also supporting the New York Trust Act, and at the state level, New York for All and the Access for Representation Act. Together, these bold investments in justice and dignity for immigrants have the potential to protect and uplift our neighbors and increase the safety and well-being of every New Yorker. Because let's be clear, when we prevent deportations, we keep families and communities together. When we uphold right to due process for everybody, we save lives. And when we invest in immigrant justice, we strengthen our democracy. As essential workers, caregivers, neighbors, as your friends, as your colleagues and voters, we immigrants build this city every day. And today, we demand a budget that protects and defends our communities, because we came here to stay and we're not going anyway. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's still morning, don't worry. My name is Karina Kaufman Gutierrez, and I'm the Deputy Director at the Street Vendor Project. We represent over 3,000 of our city's smallest businesses, 96% of whom are immigrants, who contribute tens of millions of dollars each year to our city and state economy. I want to thank you to the Comptroller for your work on this today and all of the allies who are here also in support of passing the Street Vendor Reform Package as a recommendation that we can take locally to protect immigrant New Yorkers. I have to tell you all that there's days where I feel like if I hear the phrase that street vendors are a part of the fabric of our city, I'm going to lose it. Because in what world are the street vendors who have fed New Yorkers for 300 years, have sent them off with an affordable meal in the rain, in the sun, no matter what the weather, are subjected to such cruel treatment, outdated laws, and criminalization? Every single day, the street vendors that we work with are afraid to go outside to vend. They're afraid that either they won't return home or that they'll go out to work and they'll come home less than empty-handed with a $1,000 ticket or a date in criminal court, having had their merchandise or food confiscated. All for being part of the fabric of our city. These street vendors are told to do things the right way, yet no path is provided on how to acquire a license or a permit. And so as an organization, instead of working with our members to fill out applications to acquire licensing and permitting, instead we're working with them to create family safety plans in the worst case scenario. We're not talking about laws that Donald Trump has passed, right? When we're talking about street vendors. We're talking about New York City. We are talking about local laws that can and must be changed. And that means passing the Street Vendor Reform Package. Again, we're grateful to the Comptroller, who has been a strong supporter of the Street Vendor Reform Package, and we encourage City Council to swiftly move forward in support. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Karina and Vladimir and Jillian, and especially to the providers who are providing this essential representation, and we'll be glad to take your questions. Well, one of the things we're particularly talking about restoring is Action NYC in libraries, schools, and public hospitals. That's more of a reorganization than a funding cut, so that used to be available in those places. Adams administration is making it only available in a subset of city offices. So what we want restored is those services provided in the schools and libraries and public hospitals. I think that the rapid resource, somebody might be a better budget expert on this than me. I also think that the rapid response network that has seen funding cuts, or at least funding withheld under the Adams administration, and we're proposing for that to be ramped up again. Anything else that was specifically cut? Why don't you introduce yourself? Go ahead.
Sure. Hi, my name is Deborah Lee. I'm the attorney in charge for the Immigration Law Unit at the Legal Aid Society. I just also wanted to highlight the fact that there are so many detentions happening in New York City. The New York Immigrant Family Unity Project, which is a network between the Legal Aid Society, a collaborative between the Legal Aid Society, Bronx Defenders, and Brooklyn Defender Services, is desperate for additional funding to support the work that we do. We protect people from imminent removal from the United States when they are detained. New Yorkers who are part of this city, who are family members, who are our neighbors and our colleagues, they are part of New York, and they are being ripped away from New York City, and they are being detained and facing imminent removal. We need support, and we need increased funding for NYFIP in order to defend against their removal.
I mean, this is a critical time for New Yorkers to show up in nonviolent resistance against creeping authoritarianism when the National Guard is being called out by the president without the support of governors or mayors, when ICE is denying people due process. So I would encourage people, as I did last week, to join court watching and accompaniment programs like the one Immigrant ARC runs. And I would encourage New Yorkers to be out in peaceful, nonviolent protest against authoritarianism. It is obviously a challenge, as Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass are facing, to provide people an opportunity to have their free expression rights, to participate in those protests, and to continue to de-escalate. What Trump wants right now is conflict and escalation, and what we have to do is show up and defend our Constitution and our due process, engage in that protest and nonviolent resistance, and work very hard to do it in a way that de-escalates as much as we possibly can, not to give Trump what he wants. And that's what I pray we will do here as well. I pray that the protesters will show up and do that. I pray that the NYPD will do it as well. I wish the mayor were helping more. Hi, Medina. Yes. Well, so on that, iCare is specifically a program for unaccompanied youth, and many of them are students. And then, of course, students who are part of families who are here are eligible for many of these other programs. So absolutely, the resource ask here includes representation for students. And yes, I communicated with the speaker and the immigration chair. We respect the process of the council and the in their budget negotiation. I mean, you should ask them their opinions on the. Councilmember Hanif was here. I agree with what the public advocate said. This council, has made clear. I mean, Speaker Adams going into court to deny ICE from being placed against New York City's laws on Rikers Island is to her credit. This council is working hard to support and stand up for immigrant New Yorkers, and I hope they will push as far forward on the recommendations in today's report as they possibly can.